implicit kind of approval of staying on this call. This is being recorded, but only for the purposes of the organization. It won't be distributed widely. We'll ask that if you do have any questions for the panelists or as the members are speaking, you can use the chat function of Teams, and our respective moderators, Ray Vickery and Thani Madan, will be watching that, and as questions come in, we'll try to get to it. It's a tight timeline, but we do encourage open dialogue in these moments. So I would like to just begin the program by handing it over to the chairman of the U.S.-India Friendship Council, Swadesh Chatterjee. Just a brief introduction. I think in this group in particular, Swadesh needs really no introduction at all. Swadesh has been a pioneer for decades on the U.S.-India relationship. His connections and the respect that he's garnered on Capitol Hill and in state legislatures around the country to garner the strength of the relationship of where we are now, it really is unparalleled. So we're very happy to have Swadesh open the program here. Just a brief background. He amongst his many things he's done professionally, he sits on a variety of boards, pharmaceutical, biotech, medical device, and life sciences companies. In January, Swadesh was inducted as a member of Indian Prime Minister's Global Advisory Council of People of Indian Origin. In 2007, he was the first recipient of the Community Leader of the Year award by India Abroad. Swadesh was conferred the Padma Bhushan, one of India's highest civilian awards by the President of India in 2001 in public affairs category for building better relations between the U.S. and India. So with that, Swadesh, would like to turn the program over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jasjit. It was a wonderful introduction.
You're on mute.
I did not have such a good introduction for a long time, so thank you. Can you hear me?
Swadesh, you are on mute.
I'm not in mute, unless Devika muted me.
We can hear you.
We hear you now.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Jasjit. Such a great introduction. I did not hear that such a great introduction for a long time, so thank you. You know, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the U.S.-India Friendship Council's Summit on the U.S.-India partnership in today's political landscape. I thank you for participating and especially thank our partner, U.S.-India Business Council, for their work on this program. You will all hear from U.S.-India President Nisha Biswal, who is supposed to hear, but unfortunately she fell ill, so she won't be able to attend. And allow me to say a few words regarding U.S.-India Friendship Council, and this is the 5th US-IFC Summit. You know, U.S.-India Friendship Council was formed 2005. It was part of coalition with the US-IFC, IBC, and others who advocated successfully for the landmark US-India civil nuclear deal in Congress. 16 years later, our goal remains to make the relationship between the world's largest democracies preeminent in strength between the two largest democracies and depth. Today's summit, featuring the 117th Congress's role in strengthening the US-India partnership, is a part of that effort. We will hear from senators, we will hear from congressmen, many of you known for a long time. But as you know, whenever we invite senators and congressmen, a lot of time, because of their voting schedule, sometimes it changes at the last minute. But we are very glad that despite of their very busy legislative schedule, we could get a very strong support from the both House and the Senate. Now, more than ever, the US-India partnership is vital to peace and prosperity in the US, India, and the world. Whether meeting the challenges of an expansionist China countering terrorism, fighting the pandemic, or effectuating an inclusive and expedient economic recovery, virtually every major international issue now needs a robust US-India strategy. Thanks to the strong bipartisan support of administration and Congresses over the last 20 years. And the most important is the voice of Indian American community. US-India relations are an all-time high. Throughout the last decades, through a variety of distinct administrations, whether Republicans or Democrats have been in the majority, there has been growing and unequivocal support for the US-India partnership. That kind of enthusiasm is remarkable. Similarly, Indian government from Narasimha Rao to Narendra Modi have invested in US-India friendship. The US and India have gone, in the words of American scholar Dennis Cooks, from estranged democracies to close friends. And as you can imagine, and it did not happen in one day, it took decades. And yet, we just have scratched the surface of what is possible. Security cooperation is taking off, not only bilaterally, but through the Quad. The two democracies are working together on new areas like cybersecurity. But on economic, education, health, and environmental matters, there is much more to be done. US-India trade and investment still dwarfs US-India economic engagement with US-China trade. Both capitalists must now step up and show how democracy can deliver for everyday people. And a key to reaching this full potential of the US-India partnership lies right here in the Congress. That is the reason our focus, USIFC's focus, always works with the Congress of the United States, both congressmen and the senators. In this summit, we aim to stimulate thought and action that can elevate the US-India partnership to new heights. And this lofty goal can only be achieved with the help of everyone in this program and with the support of this expert audience. Thank you for joining. I think I have the pleasure now, we'll have Senator John Cornyn from the great state of Texas to speak after this. So, Georgit, I'm assuming that Senator Cornyn will join in a few minutes.
Yes. I believe we have some of his staff on the line, but he is just joining in the next minute or so.
You all know about Senator Cornyn. If you don't know, let me tell you briefly about Senator Cornyn. You know, Senator Cornyn is a great honor actually to present to you the Senator Cornyn and former Associate Justice of Texas Supreme Court and also a former Attorney General of Texas representing 29 million Texans. He has served US Senate since 2002 and sits on the Senate Finance, Intelligence, and Judiciary Committee. He was the Republican Senate Majority Whip for the 114th and 115th Congress. Now, much more than that, which is more important to all of you and me, that he is a champion in the US-India relations. In 2004, Senator Cornyn co-founded the Senate India Caucus with the goal of strengthening US-India relationship. He was the founder chair started with Hillary Clinton at the beginning, the Democrat and Senator John Cornyn. And Senator Cornyn continues to serve as a co-chair of the caucus with Senator from Virginia, Mark Warner. And he's a great advocate of close partnership between our two countries. And in this introduction, I must also say and mention that Senator Cordin and Senator Mark Warner strong message to support for US-India relations was just quite become evident on the announcement which happened yesterday regarding the waiver of sanction of CATSA. And please welcome great senator from the state of Texas, Senator John Cornyn. Senator, thank you very much. Welcome to IFC's Global Summit.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your, allowing me to join you today and help you kick off today's virtual summit. The United States and India serve as stabilizing influences and share a common set of values, democratic ideals, and an optimism in a world that's often marred by violence and volatility. I think over the years, as I have come to know India better and learn more about our shared values, I believe more than ever that we have incredible opportunities to continue to work hand in hand with each other, as well as like-minded friends around. So I really believe the possibilities for cooperation and mutual benefit between our countries is limitless. We can lock arms to lead solutions in religious and political freedom and human rights, while forging a closer bond to promote regional stability and increase trade. This sort of potential was what I had in mind when I co-founded the bipartisan Senate India Caucus back in 2008 with Hillary Clinton. That's how long I've been here. She's moved on to other things, but I'm still in the Senate. But over the last 13 years, we've grown in size and impact today. 1/3 of the senators are a member of the India Caucus. And just so you know that this is not just an ornament we wear or a title we hold. Senator Mark Warner, my co-chair of the Senate India Caucus, recently wrote to the Biden administration asking them to waive sanctions against India for the purchase of an S-400 defensive weaponry. And I think that's in part because we know that India is a responsible actor and one that, as I said, is increasingly finds much in common with the United States. Obviously, there's economic benefits, but also military and security cooperation as well. Since the United States has designated India as a major defense partner in 2016, we've made serious strides to elevate our defense partnership in a dangerous world. As I said, one of the biggest threats to our growing relationship has been the possibility of sanctions for the purchase of the Russian S-400 missile system. But I think what gives me confidence is that India has taken significant steps to reduce its reliance on Russian military equipment and has shown an interest in purchasing equipment from the United States and, as I said, working more closely with us based on shared values. So I think not waiving these sanctions would achieve nothing and would perhaps derail the hard-earned progress that we've made to strengthen our military cooperation. So our strategic security cooperation is so important, but it's only part of the formula for a healthy US-India relationship. As the oldest and biggest democracies in the world, our countries share an interest in common prosperity through trade and the free flow of commerce. As we all know, India is a fast-growing economy and the second most populous country. It's a big emerging market with enormous potential, and there are big benefits for both of our countries to improve our trade relationships. Since 2005, the US-India trade has tripled in value, and in the coming years, I hope those numbers will get even higher. Senator Warner and I weren't shy about sharing our support for a limited US-India trade deal with former US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. And I intend to remain a vocal advocate for enhanced trade with leaders of the Biden administration and will do everything I can to help energize both of our economies. I think the area of cooperation and benefit to both our countries are limitless when we lock arms. So I want to thank you all for the work you're doing, both as individuals and organizations, to advocate for policies that promote security and prosperity for the people of the United States and India. It's been a pleasure joining you for today's event, and I hope you have a wonderful virtual summit. And I look forward to the time when we can all meet in person once again. But this is a welcome substitute during these strange times we're living through with the pandemic almost on the way out the door. So thank you so much.
Senator, it is so nice of you with this kind of strong statement, and your work on US-India relations, we always appreciate, and we are grateful what you are doing for this cause, which we strongly believe in. So thank you, Senator, that you came from your busy schedule and take the time and address the audience. We have got almost 150 people around the country, and I'm sure they enjoyed what you had to speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay. You know, now I'm waiting for our Congressman from California, and Jasjit, is he waiting for me to introduce him?
I'm just looking through our list, and I'm not sure if anyone from Representative Ro Khanna's office is on the line. You can please go ahead and identify yourself. Otherwise, I think it might make sense to jump to our first panel and have Representative Khanna join when he's available.
So Ro is not available yet?
I don't see him on the line.
Okay. So I think our first panel, let me say, it's the Defense Security panel, and I have got a star, Indian American star in this country, Dr. Tanvi Madan, who is going to moderate this panel. And the people who do not know Tanvi is a senior fellow and director of the India project at the Brookings Institution. Tanvi's work explores India's role in the world and its foreign policy, focusing in particular India's relations with China and the United States. She also researches the intersection between Indian energy policies and its foreign and security policies. Tanvi is the author of the book Fateful Triangle: How China Shaped US-India Relations During the Cold War. And you can imagine, with that kind of thoughtfulness and brilliance, we are so happy that Tanvi is with us and moderating this panel on the security. Tanvi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Swadesh, and thank you to USIBC and USIFC for the opportunity to moderate this session. I'm privileged to be moderating this panel on US-India defense and security ties. And we've got an excellent panel ahead. I believe the members of Congress will be joining us shortly. I do want to kind of list out who they are and tell you a little bit about them while we wait for them to join, as well as Atman Trivedi, who will be joining. And perhaps while we are waiting, I'll throw out a question to Atman. But joining us will be Representative Brad Sherman, who represents California's San Fernando Valley. This is his 13th term in Congress. He also currently serves on 3 House committees, including as a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And on top of that, he's also co-chair of the House India Caucus. We'll also be joined by Representative Mike Waltz, who represents Florida's 6th Congressional District. He has served over 24 years in the US Army and is presently a colonel in the National Guard. Representative Waltz currently serves on the House Armed Services Committee, and like Representative Sherman, is on the Science, Space and Technology Committee as well. And he is a vice chair of the House India Caucus. I'm also being joined here, and we are joined by Atman Trivedi, who is managing director at Hills & Company, where he's been since 2017. He's also non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Atman has worked in the Department of Commerce, the State Department, and also served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff, as well as an international trade lawyer. And he's a frequent and insightful commentator on US-India relations, building on and speaking from those various vantage points. I don't believe we have been joined yet by the members of Congress. So maybe, Atman, I can...
You do have one member of Congress.
Yes, Representative Sherman is here.
Sorry, Representative Sherman. I will...
And this is Mike Waltz. I'm there. I'm here with you.
Excellent. Well, I will kind of start our conversation then, kind of just laying out what we've seen over the recent time on the US-India defense and security ties, and then ask Representative Waltz and Representative Sherman to offer their thoughts, as well as Atman. Over the last 2 decades, we've seen multiple administrations, as Senator Cornyn mentioned, as well as members of Congress from both sides of the aisle seek and pursue a closer relationship with India. In the last few years, we've particularly seen significant progress on cooperation in the defense and security realm. And just in the last few weeks, we saw the Indian Chief of Defense Staff visit the US, and Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman and Chief of Naval Operations make separate trips to India. And along with that, we've just seen the US and Indian armies conduct an exercise in Alaska, specially focused on high altitude warfare. The US and India are also working together with like-minded partners in this domain, as was evident in their recent Malabar maritime exercise with Australia and Japan, or in the Quad Leaders Summit that took place just over a month ago. And there are, on top of that, US military personnel on the the British Carrier Strike Group that recently conducted a tri-services exercise with India. Along with that, we've been seeing cooperation and talk of further initiatives in the space, cybersecurity, and emerging technology domain. And so there's a lot to talk about, including the fact that underlying all this is a shared vision of the Indo-Pacific that the US and India and other like-minded partners have. And I do want to start there on kind of the Indo-Pacific and the question of China. Over the last few years, we've seen both the US-China and India-China competition intensify, with shared concerns about China leading to increased US-India defense and security cooperation. Representative Sherman, I want to turn to you first. Last year, you mentioned kind of Chinese aggression against India, as did the Trump administration, and now the Biden administration have called out Beijing for that. From your perspective, what are the key challenges that you see China posing today to American and Indian interests? And what more do you think the US can and should be doing with India to tackle these challenges?
Well, I thank you, Congressman Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. I've served in Congress for 25 years. For 25 years, I've been on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I have been chair of the Asia Subcommittee. I've served on the India Caucus, the largest country caucus in Congress since its inception. And I've now been honored to be the Democratic chair of the India Caucus. I have donated my only sibling to the U.S.-India relationship. She lives, my sister lives in India over half the year. And I am now in the process of donating my mayor to the U.S.-India relationship. Mayor Garcetti, I'm sure, will be in Delhi by the end of the year. I was planning to give you, in effect, a 5-minute answer to your question. And if that's too long, let me know. But your question is a wide-ranging one. I'm deeply concerned by the aggression of China to our ally India, the premeditated act of aggression in the summer of last year that led to the death of 20 Indian troops in the Galwan Valley. China has continued its aggression with cyber attacks, potentially including attacks on India's power grid, which could put civilians at risk. The rise in Chinese attacks on one of America's strongest partners is a threat not only to India's security, but to our own. Back in 2019, the House passed my amendment to the major defense bill that expanded defense cooperation between the United States and India by increasing engagements in multiple frameworks, including the Quad, which, as you know, is the United States, Australia, Japan, and India, expanding the scope and frequency of exchanges between the senior civilian defense officials and military officers, as well as joint military exercises, better implementation of major defense partnership, and enhancing the technology transfers. I think we're brought together by two things. We're pulled together by the fact that we are both democracies and very diverse democracies. We are the two largest democracies in the world, and India being the largest and America being the oldest. And we are also being pushed together by China, which is pursuing aggressive policies in the region. India and the United States are natural partners for both these reasons. As we know, the Chinese threat to the U.S. is known, whether it be geopolitical or economic. China has demonstrated an allergy to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedom of religion, we see a million Uyghurs in concentration camps. We face many issues when it comes to China, including that enormous trade deficit, the theft of technology and intellectual property, and the kind of an allergy to democracy. The Chinese influence is not just on the United States, but also on so many other countries, including the Quad allies, India, Australia, and Japan. I've already mentioned the cross-border attacks and China's expanding naval presence in the Indo-Pacific. You let me, I don't know how much time you've allocated for me. I've got more to say, but that doesn't mean I've got more time to say it. So I'll pause here and let me know whether you want an even longer answer.
Please do take your time. Okay.
Of course, we're confronted with this One Belt, One Road initiative, some $46 billion, just focused on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor package. Of course, the natural response has been a closer relationship between the United States and India, not only sharing concerns about China and democracy, but also sharing an English language, having been colonized by the same country. Since the year 2000, our bilateral trade has increased dramatically from under 20 billion to basically 150 billion. And I expect that to continue. And of course, India looks to the United States as a source of advanced defense items, many of which are made in California. Expanding trade and investment with India has been a focus of mine as the Democratic chair of the Caucus on India and Indian Americans. Of course, some of you are aware that I initiated the effort several years ago to invite Prime Minister Modi to visit the United States Congress and address us, which of course is the strongest and highest honor Congress can bestow on a foreign leader, and was pleased to be a part of the group that led him to the dais when he did come to speak. We're looking forward to expanding the 2+2. I call it 2+2 squared by adding, and COVID interrupted this, but we're going to get it done, an exchange of parliamentarians along with the defense ministers and the foreign ministers. The U.S.-India annual Malabar naval exercises and bilateral defense ties give us an existing framework to expand on protecting our countries and our dedication to international law, to international norms, to freedom of navigation. China continues to attempt to challenge the sovereignty of regional allies, not just India, of course, but others in the South China Sea. So this engagement is vital. Of course, our relationship with India is much broader than our shared security concerns regarding China. We are our natural partners. I've advised businesses I'm an old business lawyer and CPA, so advising businesses is something I have done all my life, and just getting elected to Congress was unable to stop that practice. I've advised so many businesses that investing in India and in India's supply chain makes so much more sense than investing in China, because ultimately the people in Beijing do not have any theoretical basis for their legitimacy. Every government must be able to answer the question, why are these people running things? Now, in the Middle Ages in Europe, the divine right of kings was an answer. In a theocracy such as Iran, if you believe in that interpretation of a particular religion, that might be an answer. If you are the vanguard of the proletariat and you believe in the communist ideology, okay, that might be an answer. But what is the answer from Beijing? They cannot claim to be the vanguard of the proletariat without giggling. Their party includes almost as many billionaires as our Speaker Nancy Pelosi is planning to tax. They can't answer the question, and their only answer is shut up. We're producing economic growth, and that is stalling. And then their ultimate answer to their Chinese people will be shut up, and we'll whip up extreme Chinese nationalism as an excuse for unifying the country behind a government that has no ideology supporting its legitimacy. In contrast, India and the United States have been through a lot, and there are times when its government is unpopular or its policies are difficult to support, but ultimately, people recognize democracy confers legitimacy. For example, in the United States, during the Great Depression, our institutions were strong, even though our GDP declined by over 35%. It is very clear that the Beijing government would topple if its GDP, instead of growing, were to decline by 35%. So India will continue to be a democracy. The United States will continue to be a democracy. And China will continue to be under the rule of a stable group made up of the grandsons of the vanguard of the proletariat right up until it isn't. And at that point, those who have invested in China will realize that investing in democracy makes a lot more sense. So that was a longer answer than you expected. I'm Congressman Brad Sherman. I look forward to working with you on a stronger and deeper relationship between the United States and India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. I know you have to leave, and so I really appreciate you spending the time with us. Representative Walz, along with as Representative Sherman just mentioned, there is going to be a 2+2, and you might see, according to some reports, an Indian representative in Florida joining as a liaison at SOCOM later this year, or perhaps next year, according to some reports. I know Seema Sirohi, who reported that, is on the call as well. You've also just co-written a piece, which I'm going to put the link to in chat, on the future of the US-India relationship and what it should look like. This was for Foreign Policy magazine, and it talked about an alliance. But to step back, I'd welcome your thoughts on how you see this issue of the China challenge that is facing Washington and Delhi, and what more you think the two countries can do together to tackle that challenge.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me, Congressman Mike Waltz from Florida. I represent just on the outskirts of Disney World, which many of may have visited up to the northern edge of Cape Canaveral. So we have a lot of space interest and a great university there that supports NASA. But if you haven't become a NASCAR fan, please come to Daytona, the Daytona 500, and then up the coast, the eastern coast up to Jacksonville. It's was formerly Ron DeSantis's district before he left it to go be our great governor. But just to give you a little context of my service now as vice chair of the U.S.-India Caucus and how I'm kind of approaching this. My actual first real experience with the Indian American community was one of my dearest and oldest childhood friends was a first generation Indian American. His father came with literally $40 in his wallet on a scholarship to the University of Georgia and became a veterinarian. And now his kids and grandkids are all very successful physicians. But I am a veteran of an Indian wedding, and all 3 to 4 days of it lasted the entire time. But importantly, I'm probably one of the only members of Congress that have also served in Afghanistan on the Pakistani border, have dealt with that issue on the ground, but also in the White House and in the Pentagon. And I don't think you're going to find many members that have been shot at by our erstwhile allies, the Pakistani border guards, at the same time being shot at by the Taliban. And really understand, frankly, the duplicity that's going on there for at least the last 2 decades. But importantly, through the private sector, I was able to lead a delegation of Afghan business leaders, ranging from the carpet industry to gems to agriculture and construction, to various places in industry to establish those ties and to strengthen those ties and to strengthen those supply chains. But in that trip, I had the real honor of attending and seeing Gandhi's ashram in Ahmedabad, and was able to meet then Governor Modi in Gujarat. And I just think from the Indian American community to the geopolitical outlook, for a number of reasons, this is the most important relationship of the 21st century. I believe that how things go vis-a-vis China will mean this can be a century of light or a century of darkness. And I do believe the choices are that stark. If the CCP and President Xi are successful in replacing the American dream that so many Indian Americans, my ancestors, and so many others have enjoyed, and replacing that American dream with their version of the China dream, we could have a very stark future ahead of us. So that's the kind of perspective I bring at this. Where do we sit now? Well, if we look just at China's gains on the military front, this hypersonic missile that they just launched is a game changer, is a Sputnik moment. It's kind of a Sputnik moment with a nuclear warhead, perhaps at the other end of it. And it frankly is the culmination of decades of stealing American technology and now producing a weapon that we frankly can't defend against, and is a nuclear first strike capability, not just for the United States, but for India or anywhere else in the world. It's that alarming, and I think we need a real wake-up call in the American business community and heck, across our civil society, across our political sphere to what's going on. As Representative Sherman alluded to, and I sit on armed services, so I receive the briefings day in and day out. Their Navy is now larger than ours. The average age of their ships are only 11 years, ours are 21. They are launching more into space than the rest of the world combined, including the United States and India and Europe combined. And virtually everything that's behind what they're doing in space has a military component and has the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, touching it. So I'm incredibly concerned. And I don't know that we can compete at this point, ship to ship, tank to tank, plane to plane. But what we have that the Chinese Communist Party does not have is allies and friends. And together with India, with Japan, with South Korea, with Australia, with our friends and allies in NATO, and in South Central America, and like-minded democracies and republics, I do think we can stand firm for our values and frankly stop a lot of this aggressive and malign behavior. And I pray that we do that economically and through diplomacy, but that has to be backed by, to be credible, has to be backed by a credible military component. I have been, aside from only being in Congress a few years, I've been at this a little while from a Pentagon perspective, but also serving in the Bush White House, and was proud to serve with Vice President Cheney, who was very focused on the nuclear agreement that I think was a real game changer and turning point in the U.S.-India relationship. And I think historians will look back on and will give the Bush administration, I think, the credit that it's due for making that fantastic leap and moving the relationship beyond this, kind of Cold War mentality and into a much stronger bilateral relationship. I want to spend just a moment and also talk about the terrorism component. I believe that the withdrawal that the United States just conducted from Afghanistan and the way with which it was done will be looked at, it will be something we regret, unfortunately. And unfortunately, I think the first place to feel the ramifications of it will be in Kashmir. We are seeing now that, kind of terrorism is back, and these terrorist groups, whether they are the Haqqani Network, Al Qaeda, ISIS, and their friends in Lashkar-e-Taiba, have received a real shot in the arm, a real boost. And unfortunately, I fear that the first place you may see the billions of dollars of American equipment spreading is into the Kashmir. And I really, that breaks my heart. And I fear for that. And I think we're going to have to be prepared to work together, as I stated in my foreign policy argument, op-ed with Ambassador Nikki Haley, to work together in a joint way to deal with that. In that vein, we have very few options. We went through this when we pulled out of Iraq very precipitously, and 3 years later, we saw an ISIS caliphate the size of Indiana launching attacks all over the world. We now have a Taliban caliphate with these groups that fully intend to attack the West again. And are redeveloping the capability to do so. Here's the problem. We have far fewer tools to deal with what's emerging in Afghanistan than we did in Iraq. In Iraq, we had bases in Turkey and in Jordan and in Israel and in the Gulf. We had local allies. We had troops on the ground. We had access from the ocean. We have none of those things when it comes to Afghanistan. We have no bases, no local allies, no access from the ocean. The only access we have right now is over Pakistan for our drones and for our and for any of our assets, frankly, and relying on the Pakistani military for access to deal with these terrorist groups that they have been supporting the last 20 years, to me, is like relying on the arsonist to allow access to to the fire station and to the firefighters. I mean, it's just I think it's frankly very irresponsible, and I know I'm being very blunt, but I think the security of both India and the United States are reliant on getting this right, and I'm incredibly concerned at how it's being dealt with. And then I think finally, well, I'll stop with that and see if you have any follow-on questions, but I think then it's kind of, what do we do about it?
And I want to bring Atman on this conversation, and Representative Waltz, I do want to come back to you on a couple of those themes. I will also say that it's been good to see that space, both in terms of security but also civilian cooperation, has been a major priority. And I believe NASA and ISRO, India's space research organization, will be signing an agreement soon as well. And so it's been great to see that. I know there's a new Quad space working group on that. Atman, I want to turn to you on this Afghanistan question. You've been thinking about this a little bit as well. And from your time kind of on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee staff years ago, as well as your previous stints in government, how do you see some of the kind of issues playing out? Where do you think the way forward? Is there space for the US and India to work together? How should the administration be tackling some of these difficult issues, including the Pakistan dimension of it, with India?
No, thanks, Tanvi. Important questions. Happy Diwali, everyone. Thank you to the U.S.-India Friendship Council and the U.S.-India Business Council for hosting us. I'll get to Afghanistan in a minute because it's incredibly important. But let me first say just a few words about China. And I think Congressman Waltz and Congressman Sherman before him have really done a terrific job of treating the topic. I don't have much to add in terms of the China threat. I would just briefly note here that I think China poses a multidimensional challenge like we've never seen before in terms of an overlapping military, technological, and economic threat. And that requires an equally comprehensive policy response. We haven't talked a lot about so far in this session what we should be doing with regard to China. Of course, on the military piece, I agree with Congressman Waltz that we need to be working closely with India to try to deter China and maintain peace. That, of course, includes a very strong maritime component, naval and air cooperation, and greater work on reconnaissance. Both sides need to invest in the right kinds of defense systems. And of course, India is increasingly receptive to U.S. defense technologies. We've gone from almost zero around the 2000s to now over 21 billion. Partners should continue to work together on military interoperability in India's immediate maritime neighborhood. The Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, and in particular, the closer in portions of the Indian Ocean. It's called the Indian Ocean for a reason. At the same time, they both need to work together and separately with other Asian and also European democracies. I think that'll require elevating the role of diplomacy, a process that has begun in earnest in recent months. And I think further coordination between the US and India, that kind of diplomatic coordination through the Quad with the Europeans, that'll allow them to talk with China from a position of strength. I think the trade and technology piece of this relationship is really important, and we shouldn't lose sight of it. You know, part of the China conversation is about external balancing, right? Working with India through various coalitions and partnerships. but there's also an internal balancing dimension to dealing with China. Both countries need to be stronger in all respects. And look, India and the US have had a really tough go of it with COVID-19. India is working hard now to resume high economic growth rates that are so critical to dealing with China over the long term. And US companies and workers are going to be a key part of India's economic recovery. I do think that while the China challenge is multidimensional and China is a formidable adversary, we also have to keep in mind that China isn't 10 feet tall. Its leadership faces serious economic, demographic, social, and political challenges at home. And importantly, as Congressman Waltz pointed out, it navigates those challenges without the benefits of friends that both India and America can rely on. That's an important advantage we have. If India and America can keep our democracy strong, continue to invest in their economies and people, and avoid divisions, I think there's shared natural strengths, by which I mean their openness, their technological and scientific capacity, and ability to innovate, that will help them win the fierce competition that's underway with China. On Afghanistan.
I'm going to come back to you in Afghanistan because I know Congressman Watts has to leave at 6, and I do want to get his thoughts on the way forward that he mentioned, including some of the issues you mentioned on whether on China, whether on counterterrorism. But I also kind of want to see if the Congressman has any thoughts on one of the divergences, perhaps, or at least potential points of friction in the relationship. The U.S.-India relationship and the partnership is arguably closer than it has ever been. But there is kind of in the strategic realm, at least one complication, which is India's relationship with Russia. I think Senator Cornyn mentioned that India is kind of diversifying away from a sole kind of dependence on Russian equipment. But particularly its acquisition of military equipment from that country has created some concerns here. Delhi's argued that it's to help tackle the China threat. However, the acquisition of particularly the S-400 missile defense system opens it up to U.S. sanctions under CAATSA. Congressman, if you have thoughts on that, we appreciate it, as well as what you think the way forward is in that realm or others.
Well, it is a difficult issue, and I certainly understand Delhi's history of procurements and their desire to have a diverse mix of systems. And I think we're still working through on our end, really kind of what the next steps are. So I don't want to get ahead of that, but I'll tell you what I want to avoid is the situation where we are with Turkey right now, and that they've continued to forge ahead with those procurements to the point that we had to pull back some of our most advanced systems, namely the Joint Strike Fighter, and it really has become a hindrance to our interoperability. So I think it's just important, whether it's at the 2+2, at the congressional level. One of the reasons that I'm engaging in this forum, that we keep the dialogue open, understand each other's perspective, but keep ourselves out of the corner and not box ourselves in to where we are with, frankly, right now with one of our key NATO allies. That's what I want to avoid. And I don't think we're anywhere close to that yet, but I do think we need to find some off ramps and find some ways to move in a more positive direction. In terms of the relationship, I do think at the end of the day, this competition with the CCP, and I'm careful to say the Chinese Communist Party. I have no issue with the Chinese people and their long and beautiful, amazing history and culture. But part of the problem is right here in the United States. Now my frustration is that we are in many ways financing the CCP's buildup, and we're financing Belt and Road, and we're providing the capital for it all. whether it's the amount of capital they're raising on Wall Street, even though they don't allow the same level of transparency that we demand of American and other international companies. The amount that many of these multinationals are investing into Beijing, even our pension funds who are pouring billions in, even though frankly, they don't really have a clear view from a fiduciary standpoint on what return on investment they're getting from their investors, the trade deficit. I mean, we could really go down the list. So I think we have to start viewing this through the lens of the national security issue that it is. And I've talked to many companies who, say, Congressman, we have to be able to sell into that billion-person market to stay competitive. And my response is, well, let me help you sell into a billion-person market. It's right next door in India, in the world's largest democracy that's not openly talking about replacing the United States and like-minded democracies. So I think that kind of move and that type of movement, I mean, of course, I would rather that manufacturing come out of China and come back to the United States. Heck, I would rather it be in North Florida if I had my choice. But if that's not economically feasible and doesn't make sense, then let's move it to our allies in India and Southeast Asia and Australia and elsewhere. So, this kind of move towards onshoring or ally shoring, I think will be critical going forward. And, when we have statements from Chinese state-run media that they are willing and able to clamp down on rare earth minerals, on pharmaceuticals, and other computer chips and other computer and critical supplies, if we don't align with their geopolitical views, or if we criticize the maltreatment of many of their ethnic minorities, that's a problem. I have real issue with that. And I wouldn't expect that, nor do I think we'll ever see that from any of our other like-minded allies. So that shifting of supply chains is something that we'll continue to work hard at here in Congress, and strengthening that bilateral trade relationship and breaking down many of those bilateral barriers, I think will be absolutely critical going forward. And that will set the stage, frankly, of whether we can compete and whether we can maintain deterrence through the 21st century.
And I heard the term friendshoring recently in terms of building resilient supply chains. And I think hopefully we're going to see, and we are seeing signs of a different attitude from the Modi government on trade after a number of years, and being open particularly to bilateral agreements, including with the US, Canada, UK, EU, and Australia as well. Congressman, if you have a few more minutes, I don't know if you do, Atman, I'm going to come back to you, and I know there'll be a discussion about trade in the next session. One of the questions we got was the question of AUKUS, and whether you see that as kind of, will that complement things like US-India relations or the Quad? The question was also in the context of non-proliferation. I know we haven't heard, unlike some allies, India has not criticized AUKUS. It probably, in my view, actually, they will see it as supplementing the Quad's efforts rather than distracting from it. But we would welcome your thoughts on this question of both. Do you see it as having non-proliferation implications, and do you see it as supplementary or complementary to or contradictory to the?
I think the non-proliferation regime and certainly I'm confident is robust, and I'm certainly confident in Australia's adhering to those norms. As would I, if that were on the table in the future, would be very confident in India adhering to those norms, as I think we've seen since the mid-2000s when we entered into, or the late 2000s when we entered into the nuclear agreement. But at the end of the day, Australia having an enhanced naval capability, I think is complementary and in line with all of our interests. So I applaud the move. My understanding is that the deal that the Australians had with the French was on shaky ground with from the beginning, and it just probably could have been communicated and handled differently by the White House and from Washington. But at the end of the day, I think it's absolutely in our long-term interest, and that continued interoperability, that continued enhanced capability is something that's going to benefit us. Is going to benefit us all.
Thank you so much, Congressman Walz, for taking the time and so much time out of your day to spend it with us. I know you have to leave, but I'm going to give Atman an opportunity to maybe weigh in on some of these issues. And we really do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, and happy to be with you anytime. Thank you.
Atman, I do want to kind of bring you in on the Afghanistan issue. We have a couple of minutes. On that, but also I know you and Ambassador Pickering a few years ago wrote about the CAATSA issue quite early on in 2018 itself, and talked about some of the consequences for the US-India relationship. I don't know if you have thoughts on that. I think we have about 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Tanvi. Look, Afghanistan, it was a 20-year war. I think there's ample opportunity to look at how we arrived at the situation we found ourselves in this summer. And this administration inherited a difficult situation from its predecessor, including the Doha Agreement that basically established the contours of a U.S. withdrawal. I think the unintended consequences of the U.S. withdrawal is that it complicated India's security situation. It's important that the U.S. and India continue close diplomatic coordination on Afghanistan and also about what's happening along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Expanded intelligence sharing will be a key part of the counterterrorism efforts that need to happen. The upcoming 2+2 will provide a good opportunity, I think, to assess where things stand in Afghanistan. I think the administration is very mindful of India's concerns. Following the fall of Kabul, there were a flurry of meetings, phone calls, visits that included high-ranking state, DOD, CIA, and White House officials with their Indian counterparts. I think the coordination has been really robust. And I appreciated, in particular, Deputy Secretary Sherman's assurances on a recent trip to Delhi regarding Washington's commitment to India's security. I think that's very important to reiterate in the aftermath of the fall of Afghanistan, fall of Kabul to the Taliban, pardon. India enjoys better relations with some of the countries in the region, and they can help facilitate stabilizing and positive steps if they were to take the lead. So there can be a diplomatic division of labor there. I think it's also important to keep in mind that there's a horrific humanitarian situation unfolding in Afghanistan today, and democratic countries like the US and India need to be working together in international fora with the G20 coming up to address the dire humanitarian crisis that is taking place. The people of Afghanistan need assistance, and we know that what happens in Afghanistan probably will not stay in Afghanistan based on the country's history. Very quickly pivoting to Russia and the S-400.
You've got exactly a minute. I'm getting a message, but I would appreciate you taking that minute to just let us know your thoughts.
No, in brief, I'm sympathetic to the views that Senator Warner and Cornyn laid out in their recent public letter on CAATSA. This relationship between the U.S. and India is simply too big to fail. Sanctions would pose a serious setback to the bilateral relationship, and frankly, that would be difficult to overcome in the near term. There's a long legacy in India, pointing to questions of U.S. reliability. U.S. imposed sanctions after the 74 and 98 nuclear tests. There's, the relationship has so much bipartisan support and momentum. We heard that from the congressman earlier. That it's one of the few issues, strategic cooperation with India, where everyone tends to see eye to eye. This administration has invested so much in the Quad, having a leader meeting. That was a continuation and doubling down of the Trump administration's policies. Why put it all at risk over sanctions that were there to hold Russia accountable at a time when there were questions about whether or not Moscow was being held to account for what happened in the 2016 elections and 2014 over Ukraine? It was a different set of circumstances. Let's get this relationship with India continuing in the vein that it is, very positively. India is critical, I think we can all agree, to maintaining a favorable balance of power in Asia.
Thank you so much, Atman. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor back to Swadesh Chatterjee, who will introduce the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanvi, Atman. Great panel, great job. As Congressman Walsh and Sherman made some very important and thoughtful comments, and it is very thought-provoking. So excellent job. Now I'm going to bring one of my good friends, and we worked together for, I think, 3 decades. And he's a pioneer in US-India relations. And as you know, he was the Deputy Assistant Secretary with Ron Brown long time ago. He was the Senior Associate at CSIS and Senior Advisor to the Albright Stonebridge. And as many of you know, I had the privilege to have a book release for him, The Eagle and the Elephant. And I remember we had a release of his book in Calcutta, India. And Ray is a #1 core member of US-India Friendship Council. And it is my privilege to introduce my good friend, Ray Vickery.
Thanks very much, Swadesh. I really appreciate those words. Before we get started on the economic panel, may I just say a couple of words on behalf of my Senator, Mark Warner, who is to be with us today. Mark, as you know, chairs the Senate Intelligence Committee and is co-chair of the Senate India Caucus. Swadesh and I go way back with Mark. In fact, we talked to him in 2008 at the Denver Democratic Convention, and Mark said he wanted to be involved more in U.S.-India matters, and he really got involved, and he became the co-chair, has been a strong voice. There have been references to the letter that Mark and Senator Cornyn wrote to President Biden in regard to waiver of CAATSA. It's a very strong letter, and I would encourage everyone who is on the call to contact their senators and their Congress people, their representatives, to get behind this effort for the waiver. I would like just to read a couple of words about this. The letter says, the application of CAATSA sanctions could have a deleterious effect on a strategic partnership with India, while at the same time not achieving the intended purposes of deterring Russian arms sales. As such, we strongly encourage you to grant a CAATSA waiver to India for its planned purchase of the S-400 Trummy surface-to-air missile system. And it goes on to cite the reasons for that. We're very fortunate to have with us in this session on economics two of the leaders in Congress, Representative and Dr. Ami Bera, as well as a very senior member of the House, David Price, who's a good friend of Swadesh, and we're very happy that Swadesh was able to talk him into giving us some time here today. Let me just say a couple of opening words after I wish everybody on the call a happy Diwali. Diwali is the triumph of light over darkness, and I think that that's what we're talking about here today. I think from the panel which we've just heard, you can recognize how important it is to have a strong economic foundation to the U.S.-India relationship. There are some people who will say, well, you know, strategic matters and economic matters are separate and different. And indeed, we have two different parts of the program here. But the reality is there is only one reality, and it includes the economic foundation. And the economic foundation goes to efforts in regard to health, in regard to climate change, in regard to the full gamut of relationships. I'm afraid that China, that we've talked about a lot here today, understands that better than the United States does. If you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, it is in fact an economic initiative, and it's a way of putting forward the Chinese authoritarian interest. And it doesn't have to do just with infrastructure. It has to do now with trying to set the standards for the digital interaction, the cybersecurity, and the whole gamut of what happens in the internet. And this shows, it seems to me, the underlying relationship between these two spheres. Swadesh has mentioned that as Assistant Secretary of State, I went out to India with Ron Brown on a presidential business development mission in the early 1990s. And that was an initial salvo that opened up the relationship between the United States and India. It is just not the case that we can go forward with a strong security relationship and not have an equally strong economic relationship to act as a driver for so many of these things. And we have to realize, it seems to me, that the whole object of what we're talking about here is bringing peace and prosperity to the world. And those two are inextricably linked. Peace, like war, has to be waged, and one of the primary weapons for waging peace is the economic relationships between the U.S. And India. With that, do we have Congressman Bera on the line?
I believe Representative Bera is calling in on the phone. If one of the phone callers is Rep. Bera or from his office, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know you're there. If not, I know that we do have Representative Price on the line. I believe I saw his name earlier.
Well,
it's Congressman. I'm sorry.
We're very fortunate to have you, David. We're awfully glad that you could be with us today. Let me just say a couple of words about Congressman David Price. He is North Carolina's only member of the House Appropriation Committee and serves on the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriation Subcommittee. He's the chairman of that. He also serves on the Subcommittee on Homeland Security and the Subcommittee on State, Foreign Operations, and Related Programs, and the House Budget Committee. Congressman Price is a recognized leader on foreign policy and chairman of the House Democracy Partnership. He holds doctorates and bachelor's degrees from Yale, did his undergraduate work at the University of North Carolina, and I'm proud to say he was a professor at my alma mater, Duke University. He served in Congress since 1987. And Congressman, I understand that you may not decide to run again next year. And I want to say that you set the standard for honesty, integrity, thoughtfulness, wisdom, and demeanor in the Congress. In these days of rancor and downright nastiness, Congressman Price has stood as a beacon for all and as an example of what a congressman ought to be. With that, is Congressman Barrow on the line? I guess Ami hasn't gotten to us yet, David. So let me start, if I might, by asking you a question, Congressman Price, which comes from your perspective on the House Appropriations Committee. And of course, anybody who knows anything about Congress knows that that's where much of the real power of Congress lies. Now, much legislation has a significant impact only if money is put forward behind the legislation. For example, there's a bill that Senator Menendez, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has dropped in to act as an authorization for millions of dollars for U.S.-India clean energy research and development and technical assistance. I'm not asking for any comment on that particular legislation, but what is the path forward and what are the prospects for funding U.S.-India cooperation in such areas as climate change, infrastructure, and I guess one of the reasons that Mark Warner, or the reason Mark Warner can't be with us, is he's negotiating right now on the reconciliation bill, the Build Back Better bill, and I'm wondering if that has any impact on the U.S.-India relationship. But Congressman, we would very much like to hear from your years of experience, your views on these matters.
All right, thank you. I appreciate your kind words and the generous introduction, and of course, I'm always glad to see my friend Swadesh Chatterjee, who's offered so much leadership over the years. We have been reminded in recent weeks how much, once again, we share with the people of India as both of our countries have gone through this COVID experience, and in the case of India, a very cruel and devastating COVID attack that hit all at once and caught the country short in terms of medical facilities and supplies. My friend Swadesh had a grievous family loss in the midst of that, which we of course express sympathy for that. As usual, Swadesh assembled the Indian community, as we often do at a time of crisis, whether it's a natural disaster or a pandemic or whatever it might be, or happier occasions as well. But we have a thriving Indian American community in North Carolina, and Swadesh is a leader of that group. And so there were a couple of meetings, one by Impact North Carolina, the other by the U.S.-India Friendship Council, where Deborah Ross in the neighboring 2nd District and I met with members of the Indian community and got their personal stories about the impact of the COVID pandemic at that peak time, and also talked about what could be done to step up the availability of vaccines and medicines in that situation, and what in particular the U.S. should be doing. So we have had that recent indication of solidarity, and our country did reach out in that instance. I'm aware of the Menendez bill. I can't say I know about it in great detail. There is not a House counterpart, But it's interesting, and there was a similar initiative with respect to Israel a few years ago, as I recall, and the idea is to simply frame up the some of the possibilities, exciting possibilities for U.S.-India relationship, to encourage U.S. and India working together on clean energy. The bill focuses particularly on clean energy research and development, and climate-related challenges, improved infrastructure, somewhat more broadly. And so it certainly it certainly articulates an exciting possibility, and so I'll be interested in how that might move forward. It certainly should encourage discussion and creative thinking about what we might do together. I'll just say a word about my own role here, and then can respond to any comments or questions people have. I am on the Appropriations Committee, and have hung around the Congress long enough to now be the chairman of the subcommittee I wanted to chair all along, which is the Transportation and Housing Subcommittee, Transportation HUD Subcommittee. We have written our bill for fiscal 22, and you know, in all this talk about infrastructure, where we seem to talk a lot more than we actually achieved, we developed a kind of smart aleck saying on our subcommittee that, well, everybody seems to be talking about infrastructure. Guess who's actually doing it? And that is true. There's some truth in that. We made a good down payment on a lot of infrastructure investments over the years, and that is true of our fiscal 22 bill as well. And I can talk about what's in that bill if anyone is interested in that. There's not a particular international angle to that, except that we know it's high time for our country to step up and improve our competitive situation. And of course, now we're dealing with a much bigger prospect with the Build Back Better initiative. I'm glad Mark Warner's off working on that. We need his best efforts and everyone else's to get this done. The first bill number 1 in the series has bipartisan support. It's already passed the Senate, and we need to pass it as quickly as possible in the House. And then the broader bill, which unfortunately does not have bipartisan support, and therefore has to be passed with a special budget process known as reconciliation, which avoids the filibuster. That bill is the one that is getting the big time negotiation right now, and we're hopeful that will emerge as well, because that addresses many overdue challenges as well. Let me just free associate here a bit with respect to the climate issue and the kind of cooperation, international cooperation that's required here. One reason we need to get this bill in good shape and be certain that we're passing it is because we want Joe Biden to go to the COP26 conference, the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. We want him to go there from a position of strength. I understand Prime Minister Modi is also going to be in attendance at that conference. I hope that's true. That is good news if true. And we want our president to go with confidence that our country is taking this on, not just taking on our infrastructure challenge, of course, but is doing it in a way that addresses the climate challenge as well. Going to be 197 countries at that conference. And it could not come at a more crucial time for India, for the U.S., for the entire international community. It's just we've just got to have a more robust, not just discussion, but a robust engagement among countries around the world to take on the goals of mitigation and adaptation and finance and collaboration to combat the effects of climate change. There is, of course, a foreign assistance component to all this. This does not so much apply to India, but it applies to countries that we, along with India, need to encourage, need to figure out ways to encourage. And one of those ways is, of course, finance. My other appropriations subcommittee is the State Department and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, and we have over $3 billion of support for programs to address climate change in our fiscal 22 bill, which is pending. All these appropriations bills are awaiting Senate action. So that is a critical aspect of this, of course. Just as the pandemic, none of us are safe until all of us are safe. In this area of climate change, this has to be an international effort. All nations involved. Some are more threatened than others. Some are more farther along than others in dealing with emissions. All have to be as part of this program. This is a frightening and ominous situation, and we all must deal with it. So there's a lot on our common agenda. COVID has brought that into sharp relief, but there is so much more than we need to do. We have our we are organized here in the House with our India caucus. Swadesh and his friends in North Carolina had a lot to do. Well, first in his national leadership role, he had a lot to do with founding that caucus. Certainly had a lot to do with encouraging me to be part of the caucus and to be part of the first delegation to the Lok Sabha to launch the U.S.-India parliamentary partnership. So we're going to be meeting in person again soon, and I think high on the agenda ought to be the subject matter of this conference: economic cooperation, climate policies, and the things that the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy can undertake in common. So let me thank you for being able to join you. I hope Ami Bera is now on the line. I'll await eagerly what he has to say.
I think unfortunately Rep. Bera had to drop for his other meeting, but back over to you, Ray. I think we're at a good point to do our closing with Swadesh.
Yeah, Ray, any closing comments you want to make?
Well, I just want to reiterate again our thanks for everybody who's on the call, for Congressman Price, for Senator Cornyn, for Representative Waltz, for Representative Sherman, all those who participated. And I want to thank Jasjit Singh particularly, and the U.S. India Business Council for the hard work on this.
Thank you, Ray. Yeah.
I think we all realize how important this subject is to the peace.
Thank you so much. And David, I must tell you how fortunate I am, and the North Carolina communities, Indian American communities are, for you become our congressman, our leader. And as Ray, you rightly said, that he's a beacon. Everybody should follow what David Price is all about. So David, it is a bittersweet when I heard the news a few days ago that you are not going to run, but I can tell you what I have learned, what we have done together. I would never forget. It is already embarked in my brain, and it will remain for a long time. Hopefully we'll meet again. So thank you first for joining. Ray, you made very good comment about David. Having said that, I'll say I was very, very excited to hear when Rep. Waltz talk about US-India civil nuclear deal. That tells that when we started this journey, Ro, and my other team who is in the call were the core member of US-IFC. And when we started and formulated that for a successful completion of US-India nuclear deal, that changed the equation of US-India relationship. And it is not about the nuclear power. It is about where the relationship should go. And you saw today the bipartisan support, whether it is Republican or Democrat. It is Senator John Cornyn, Republican. Senator Waltz is Republican. We have senior members like David Price, Brad Sherman. So we have a strong bipartisan support, which we wanted for a long time. And today, the thoughtful discussion of all the panel members, Tarmi Madan, Atman Trivedi, Ray Vikari, And everybody else who joined has given a lot to think about. And the comments the congressmen and senators made, that makes us very good and proud. But as I told in my speech at the beginning, we are just scratching the surface. So we need your support. Your attendance means a lot to us. And Jasjit, your contribution for this conference is so great. Without you and USIBC, we could not make this happen. So thank you, all my speakers, including Senator Cornyn, Walsh, Brad Sherman, David Price. You have made a big difference. And thank you all the panelists, and good night.